All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is Gabby from ForexNChill Academy. I'm going to be doing a quick review, weekly review of what I'm looking at going into the week, and I'm pretty much going to start with the DXY. Going into the week, look at the DXY and what we actually anticipate for the major currencies going into the week. Actually going to be an interesting week. We have a couple of red folders popping up, especially on the DXY. We have NFP, one of the key things coming out this week for Friday. So we're going to be paying attention to that and how that will help play into the narrative we're looking to, build going into the week. So we start off with the DXY, which is where I pretty much like to start off every week. So going into the DXY, we can see we've had a very strong rally on the dollar index going into, coming from prior weeks. And now price ran into a weekly imbalance, that's weekly fair value gap. And we got a rejection of that, a very quick rejection of that. And we actually had a very strong bearish print going into last week, the close of last week. What we've seen right now is the dollar has gone from a bullish order flow right now to more of a bearish order flow, because we actually have our first bearish print has closed below the low of that weekly candle. That's a very strong indication of bearishness coming into this week. So I'm going to be looking more on the sell side for the dollar going into the week before the NFP, basically. So looking more of the bearish side into the dollar. So where could be the drawn liquidity? I'm looking at the whole of this range, because so that drive up all the way, two candle closes above that high for me. That is a change of behavior. So what we now have is we actually have the low to the high. It's the range I'm pretty much looking at right now. And we see that's the 50. So anything above that is the premium. Below that is discount. And we actually have sell side liquidity resting there. We actually have a weekly fair value gap. So that would be the anticipated draw on liquidity. I'm not saying price will get there, today, tomorrow, but that's drawn liquidity for me. I'm going into the weeks in December. So that's where the play is coming into the weekly. So our weekly order flow is bearish. Now we could break down to the daily and see, what we actually have. On the daily, we see price traded into, that's the weekly fair value gap. We saw a rejection. And right now, that was the last low that initiated that rally to the upside. Right now, price is actually taking out that low. We see two candle closes below. That is a change of behavior, for me. So what I wanted to see right now is, now price is taking out what? External liquidity. I want price to pull back for what? Internal liquidity. And that's that daily fair value gap we actually have there. And hopefully we get some kind of rejection of that area back to the downside. We could get some kind of support here also, or price could run through that because the order flow is bearish right now. That is the drawn liquidity I'm pretty much going to be anticipating, going into the week. So we could get two scenarios. I try not to paint things anything cast in stone. Two scenarios. I could probably look at price open, drop first into that daily fair value gap. We get some kind of support into that area. Price drives higher into the area we're anticipating, and then see a drop. That would be awesome, but definitely market doesn't play exactly what I wanted to play. But this could be the scenario, or we could get a first rally, a first rally, and that could be going for that daily fair value gap and the drop, or price could just run Friday's high and we could get the dump, on that narrative. It depends on how price play, but notion, our narrative is we are bearish the dollar, we bearish the XY, and want to see price drop, to those draw on liquidity. You see, we actually have a daily bullish order block there. Those are things that could act as some kind of, support in terms of price, but spade price invalidating those stuff. Price trade also all the way. That's where we actually have the draw. Basically, we also have the volume imbalance there, where we have nobody of the candles. We see only the week of that candle that I could draw that in also as the volume imbalance. That also could be the drawn liquidity in terms of price. Let me pull that and just pull that in. Yeah. So that's going to be what? A volume imbalance. So yeah, so that also, so we have very strong liquidity to the downside. I want to see price, run into all those areas, and we're going to be watching those areas carefully. But the draw liquidity is to the downside. Go into the 4 hour, we actually have various bases at the 4 hour buy side liquidity. So we could see price run above that area, and we're looking for anticipation. Notice for our buy side liquidity exactly where we actually have the daily fair value gap. We also have the 4 hour fair value gap rested above. So price will extend into that, and we're going to see if we get any sell reactions all the way to the downside, targeting the weekly, the low of last week, into the daily fair value gap. Or what we could do, also get alternate scenario. Yeah, we have to paint various scenarios because we don't know exactly what the markets do. We could get a drop, a sweep of previous week's low into the daily fair value gap, get a rejection to the upside for that, and we start looking if we actually get sellers coming into that area, and we're driving ultimately for that volume imbalance on the daily. Notice we also have a 4 hour sell side liquidity here. Let me change this. That's a sell side liquidity SSL. It's a sell side liquidity to the downside, and we'll just watch what price does. So these are the narratives: initial drop, rally, drop, or we get a rally first, then a drop down, then all the way to the downside. So this could be the play for the DXY. So if we have that for the DXY, it means we're literally looking for buy side, basically on the majors. EU, GU, AU, NU, we're looking for buy side. Things like your USD card, your UJ, you're looking pretty much like sell scenario. So let's take a look at what we could see on all those other pairs, GU. And why am I looking at GU? Most of the time, I try to look at the two of them. I look at EU, I look at GU, and try to figure which is stronger, because the stronger one against the weaker dollar is going to give you a lot more movement, going into this week. So then you take a look at Euro GBP, easily. I see the other flow is still bearish. Why? We are still having very strong bearish spring to the downside. The last time we actually get a run up liquidity to the upside, and last week we saw price run again, and we saw a rejection back to the downside. The drawn liquidity, let me zoom out, it's that weekly sell side liquidity there, and ultimately that low. So that's the low of 2022, basically. We have that liquidity and the low of 2022. That's the drawn liquidity. So if we actually have sell side Euro GBP, that tells me I have a stronger pound, than Euro. So the pound is a lot more stronger than Euro. So I would be looking for buy side GBP USD. Yes, we could get that also on Euro. Euro could run some liquidities before pulling up, but we'll get a lot more better move on GBP USD. So going into the weekly, what do we have? We have a bit of a challenge here because this is traded into a weekly fair value gap. So we're going to be careful with the longs going into this area, and which kind of ties in with the DXY. If we get, the DXY strengthening a bit to the upside, and this will drop, to the downside, and we'll start looking for that buy possibility when the DXY starts, dropping further. So the DXY is kind of the benchmark currencies to actually anticipate what we're looking to do on the others, irrespective of the structures of this guy. So what do we have on GU on the daily? So we see GU on the daily. We actually have a daily fair value gap here. Price just ran external liquidity. And this is what I'm saying. We could either see two scenarios: a run into the daily fair value gap and a rejection, lower to get lower prices, and we probably start seeing if we get any buy narrative going into that. This could trade lower, into that guy there. If you go to the lower time frame, that's going to be most likely a bullish order block. I'm looking at that daily fair value gap support price, and we're looking at the weekly buy side liquidity as the draw on liquidity, ideally, because our other flow has switched bullish for GPUSD and bearish, for DXY. We're looking for that drawn liquidity to the upside. So we're looking for a retest of the daily fair value gap and a buy. Remember, we could get that rejection of that, then this, or we could get an initial drop into the daily fair value gap, initially, then we get a rally into the higher daily fair value gap. That will be one of the drawn liquidity, and we'll see how price reacts there. We could get some kind of rejection, then we want to see price find support again. And that is one of the play I want to see going into the week. Basically, on the GU. For those looking to trade the EU, you're looking for very similar narrative. But like I said, the EU is a lot weaker. So the EU might trade a lot softer. Let's go to the EU. You see the weekly, you see the other flow on the weekly still seems bearish. But because DXY is bullish, we're going to be looking more of the bullish one, on this guy. We actually have the weekly fair value gap above that could, give us a run into that area and a drop, into that week. Then we'll start looking for most likely buying narratives pretty much to the upside on EU. Let's break this down to the daily and see what we can find in terms of the daily. Nothing is cast in stone. We're just looking for possible narratives we can look to deal with going into the week. So we see on the daily, we actually have that's the weekly fair value gap, and we also have the daily fair value gap rested in there. That would be one of the draw on liquidity for Euro USD before we even get some kind of profit taking retest, of that area to the downside. Right now, I see we really don't have anything on the downside. I could start leaning against than this buy side liquidity here. So, but I really don't expect price to come all that low because we also have, what do we have here? A bullish order block. So we'll see if price, holds in that bullish order block. We could break this a lot lower on the 4 hour and start looking for what we could look to deal. We don't want to see price take out that other block ideally. So we could see a run of that low, a run of this low, most likely, and we're actually have fair value gap, 1 hour fair value, this is a 4 hour fair value gap. Let me increase that. That could be a play. We're looking at that. Let me zoom this in, put this in, and just that's all. 4 hour fair value gap, but 1 hour is a lot lower, and we actually have a bullish order block. I like that because we have sell side liquidity into 4 hour fair value gap and a bullish order block resting there. We're just going to be watching all those and seeing how price play. Price will first run those liquidity and get a drop first. Once you see displacement and you get your pattern for the sell, you could actually do a short-term counter trend, and spade probably a buying narrative going into the week. This could drop a lot deeper because, like I said, it's weaker than GU. Then we're anticipating the rallies to the upside. We have drawn liquidity to the upside right there. And those are what we could be looking to play. Now, one of the things we could use to actually anticipate how this is going to play for the week is by looking at what the weekly calendar, tells us. So let's take a look at what Forex Factory has for us. Yeah. So this is the news we actually have this week. We actually have Monday. We actually have USD. This is in my time, UTC +1. You could actually check it in your time also. So this is dollar. This is the dollar ISM manufacturing PMI coming out for 4 p.m. my time tomorrow. This should be pretty much at 10 a.m. New York time. Yeah. So we see we're actually getting better data than previous. They're anticipating a better than previous data. They're forecasting the better data for the PMIs, ISM manufacturing PMIs. That's a positive sentiment for the dollar. We look at the job openings on Tuesday. We also see they're anticipating 7.49 million as against 7.4 million previously. That's a positive sentiment because this is a lot higher than previous. This is a lot higher than previous. So we actually have positive sentiment on the dollar going into the early part of the week. So Monday, Tuesdays, we have a positive sentiment for the dollar. Going into Wednesday, we now have on Wednesday, 2:15, we have the ADP non-farm payroll employment change. We actually have that going a lot lower. Negative sentiment for the dollar. We also have the ISM service PMI negative for the dollar. So we actually have a positive sentiment earlier in the week and a negative sentiment going later into the week. Thursday's US unemployment claims going lower. This is also negative for the dollar. So if that's going to be the narrative, initial positive for the dollar means we're looking for an initial drop. Yep. In this currency. So it means the dollar, if this runs the liquidity, overnight to Sunday night, and we actually get those positive, this is actually going to push the dollar upwards. So we're anticipating dollar running upwards It could get there. It could get the short-term high and start selling. But ideally, I want it to get here. So positive for the dollar. If we actually get this run overnight, Sunday going into Mondays, then we actually have those positive sentiments in terms of the data coming out 4 p.m. That should push dollar to the upside. Tuesday also positive sentiment going into Wednesday. So maybe Wednesday might be the high of the week for Tuesday, but Wednesday might most likely be the high of the week. Then we'll go into negative sentiment, which should give us now this narrative to the downside. So I would like the scenario a lot more. So which means if this is going to be sweep rally drop, then on GU I'll expect what a drop okay, rate of the high drop then rally. So let's zoom out. So I expect a run of previous day's high, and that liquidity there into daily fair value gap. A drop, into liquidity bullish of the block. We also have a daily fair value gap. I don't know if you get that far. Then pretty much a rally for the buy side liquidity there. So that could be the sentiments we're expecting. Earlier strength in the dollar, sentiment for the dollar because of the positive sentiment from these data pushing the dollar to the upside, and then negative sentiment pushing the dollar back in line with what the order flow is doing. And that's what we'll be anticipating for the week, basically. So that's going to be my short outlook for the week. I hope you actually enjoy this. Please tune in. We're going to be dropping a lot more content. ForexNChill Academy, we actually have a lot of education going on in there, a lot of strategies, brilliant educators, signal services, cryptos. We're coming up with a whole lot going into 2025. I'd like you guys to, click subscribe and stay locked on to ForexNChill Academy. So I'm signing out now. Have a lovely week ahead. Have a beautiful week ahead, guys. Take care.